Welcome everyone, and good evening to students and faculty joining from India, and to the people joining in from different parts of the world. Good morning, good afternoon, and to people joining in from Richmond, to Garret, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We're back with another episode of the former Woxsen Global Forum, but now I'd like to take the opportunity to also share with you that the Woxsen Global Forum has now been rebranded as the FutureYou Talks. As all of you know, at Woxsen, we are gradually focusing on building the future of tomorrow, future of you, all of you who is part of the Woxsen family. And that is why I think it is important to focus on certain topics which will define the future of certain industries tomorrow. So I'm very happy to introduce today at the show Professor Garret Westlake, who is the Vice Provost of Innovation at Virginia Commonwealth University, joining us from Richmond right now. And it's an honor to have you with us, Garret. If you'd like to share your opening remarks with us, please feel free.
Sure. First, thank you all so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Something that you should know about me is that one of my driving influences is that I hate school. I've always hated school, and yet I really love learning. And that's why I've always had a hard time with school. Traditional education for me was very siloed, was very formulaic, and lacked curiosity too often. And I think just in hearing briefly about the origin story of your institution, it strikes me that it's really focused on learning, right? It's not 400 years old and has been teaching this way for 400 years and is hesitant to change. I think what drives me around this topic of innovation and education is really, how do we refocus on learning? How do we refocus on curiosity? How do we take risks? How do we explore new fields and new domains without worrying about the categorization, right? Is this a business case study? Is this an engineering case study? And that's why I really appreciate that where I am now in the Da Vinci Center, all of our degree programs are cross-disciplinary. So our center sits at the intersection of arts, business, engineering, and the humanities and sciences, increasingly alongside our health sciences campus. So, we offer degrees in product innovation. Well, where does product innovation live, right? Is product innovation in the business school? Not entirely. Is it engineering? Not entirely. Is it design? Not entirely. And I think when I look back in history, some of our most prolific inventors did not worry themselves about whether they were a business student or whether they were an engineering student. Our center is obviously named for Leonardo da Vinci. I find his resume to be incredibly inspirational. If you've ever seen Leonardo da Vinci's resume, he tells you that he'll paint you a picture, he'll build you a war machine, he can make a bridge, he'll do sculpture, he'll paint, like, what do you want? And I think the goal that we have for students graduating from our programs increasingly is that they have those same skills, that all of our students are certified Scrum Masters and know Scrum and Agile. They know design thinking. They know product management. They know engineering and prototyping and 3D printing, right? Now they're going to become experts in AI or ChatGPT, which we'll talk about, is just going to do everything for us, right? So, I think higher education has been largely stagnant for hundreds of years. And I think disruption has come to lots of other areas. We've seen it. We've been excited about it. And for some reason, a lot of people get really nervous when innovation comes to education. It makes people scared. And I think what I'm hoping to talk a little bit about is how can we make innovation and education less scary? And what are those opportunities for education in the future if we're able to accept and embrace innovation?
Well, thank you so much, Garret. I think that gives us a very strong perspective of the topic that we are discussing on a question. Just so in the interest of everyone present here in the room, today we are discussing on innovation and education, and what are the strategies for sustainable success. So while we're talking about that, since Garret has already laid down the foundation of the conversation. Let me begin with the very first question, Garret. What do you think, in your opinion, at Virginia Commonwealth University, what are the factors that influence the sustainability of innovation in education space? So what are the things that you guys are focusing on that will sustain for a longer time and will actually build the future, the future that one where people can embark on and bask on the glory of something like perhaps the revolution in technology. And now we're talking about ChatGPT going forward. I'm sure in the next 5 to 7 years down the line, things will not be the same, and there will be another revolution in technology that we're going to see. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the things that I see it more as, one of our students said this better than I could one time. So I'll quote one of my students. They said that creativity is thinking of new ideas. Innovation is the implementation of new ideas. And entrepreneurship is the sustaining of new ideas. And I think those things really go together with increasing levels of difficulty, right? We can sit around a whiteboard and come up with really cool ideas for the future of education. That's creativity, right? Okay. Implementation of those ideas is a step harder, right? Like, hey, we actually need to implement, this is challenging. But to your question about sustainability, that's entrepreneurial, right? That's entrepreneurship. And I think that has been a missing piece to a lot of educational institutions. They have not been challenged to think entrepreneurially about how they sustain new innovations. And so one of the strategies that we would use would be human-centered design, right? Are we really understanding our users and their pain points to better design products? And I'm not afraid to call higher education products or services, right? Like, some people really don't like talking about students as customers and talking about it as a product, but I teach product innovation, so that's what you get. So when you look at it in that perspective, this idea of how do we really know who our customer is, where is there friction in the system for them, and how can we reduce friction for students and give them what they want, not saying anything about reducing academic standards, but from a process perspective, right? When I log into Netflix, Netflix tells me what it thinks I would enjoy watching next, right? It does that seamlessly. When I finish one show, it starts streaming the next show 15 seconds later to keep me going. When a student leaves a class at university, do they instantly just start walking into their next classroom because the university knows what they should take next? And they're like, oh, I'm going to stick around for this one. That is not the experience that most students have at university. And so I think increasingly you see divergence between what technology and products and services look like outside of the academy and what the academy has historically done. So I think to be sustainable in the future is two things really, right? We have to better understand the needs of our users and be quicker to adopt technologies and strategies that are closer in resembling what happens in the private sector. And two, we have to think more entrepreneurially. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. If I told you, Salesforce, if I asked you what kind of company Salesforce was in the world, you'd probably tell me they're a CRM company, right? However, Salesforce only generates 30% of their revenue from CRM related activities. All right. 70% of Salesforce revenue comes from non-CRM activities. And yet, if I asked you what they are, you'd say they're a CRM company. I think universities will be the same. If you asked what the primary focus of a university was, you'd say 4-year education to undergraduate students, a little bit of graduate work. That's who universities serve. But I think we need to think differently about where the revenue comes to support that. It cannot be solely this tuition-based model going forward. There need to be other revenue streams that come into the university that allow for us to provide outstanding undergraduate and graduate education. And that is a huge paradigm shift for education, to realize that it's not just money from the government and tuition dollars that allow the universities to sustain itself. We need to be much more entrepreneurial in terms of how we can generate revenue and value to our communities.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with what you've mentioned. I think the idea of being entrepreneurial and having that risk mindset and focusing on building that sort of a learning environment wherein one can feel comfortable and be able to grow every single day with what are the challenges that the environment brings. And I think we live in a very volatile environment. It's highly volatile, and the next day you wake up, I think you hear about the next evolution that's coming on in for you, and you just need to embrace it. I mean, there's no other option that you have. We just need to be, I mean, either you embrace it or somebody else is going to replace you and take your position. It's just as simple as that. I mean, we're talking about whether AI is going to replace humans. I think people who do not embrace AI will be replaceable very fast, and it's not the other way around. So I think you're, I mean, going to agree to that. With that in mind, and with what you've mentioned, my next question is about how do you think personalized learning in classrooms can be implemented, and with having that innovative approach in the entire teaching learning process, you know, not just the facilitator, which is in this case the faculty who delivers the courses, but at the same time the receiver, which is the student, also needs to have that receptive and an innovative mindset. AACSB says that, you know, everybody is a learner, whether it's a faculty or a staff or a student or a government or a, you know, anybody involved in the entire education process is a learner. So with that in mind, how do you think we implement a very personalized learning experience, and how do we encourage that?
Yeah. You know, I think one of the best ways to do that is through applied projects. So all of the coursework that our students are doing is heavily applied with industry partners. So, you know, this idea that you're just going to go to a lecture hall and be shown case studies and say, you know, this is what Coca-Cola did in 2005 and they made this choice. I don't think anybody thinks that that is helpful or relevant anymore, right? The speed at which things change is so fast. You know, while we're on this call, like Elon could have done something monumental in any one of his companies, and like it will be relevant to what business practice is today by the end of this call, right? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? So what we have found is, you know, in our master's program, we were once asked, why is there not an introduction to innovation course, right? Why don't you teach me what innovation is from an academic standpoint? And we say, the practicum-based course where teams of students are embedded with our corporate partners working in product innovation for Pfizer, for Capital One, for Adobe, that's where you learn innovation. That's where you learn what corporate innovation looks like today, is by being inside a Fortune 500 company on their innovation team and working on real world products for them that come to market. And I think that is very scary for traditional students who've been taught, you know, I just need to get a good grade on the test. Tell me what the material is. And this goes to your point, right? Like, if all you're worried about is what's going to be on the exam, and if you're going to get a good grade on the exam, AI can do that. Like, we saw that this week, right? Like, AI had no trouble passing Ivy League exams. So if that's what you say you're good at, is taking exams, then like you're in a tough spot going forward. However, if you can join on a team and you can bring your unique areas of expertise and your emotional intelligence and your creativity and work collaboratively, those are the skills coupled with your academic fundamentals that I think are going to drive that going forward. So the one way to make it more personalized is to allow students choice of, hey, this semester we are working with a big energy company, we're working with a healthcare company, we're working in finance, we're working in digital product, we're working in software. Which one of those applied projects do you want to demonstrate your mastery by working towards? And I think those choices for students are increasingly valuable. They're a little bit harder to scale up, right? It's not as easy as showing a PowerPoint, you know, to the same class that you did last semester, but it's much more rewarding as a faculty member. I find that it's incredibly insightful for me to get to work with all of these companies, and certainly for our students who often go to work for them.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that you mentioned the ability of applied projects and doing joint projects together amongst the, you know, the same peers in the classroom, I think the idea nowadays of the COIL programs, which is the collaborative online international learning with students and faculty of different partner institutions, and that also has the power of bringing that sort of an innovative mindset in the classrooms. And I totally agree with what you mentioned. What are your views on how does collaborative learning add on to that innovative approach in the teaching learning process. What are your views on the collaborative learning?
So, I mean, I think when you look at most of work today is collaborative, right? There are very few roles that don't require collaboration that can't be replaced by AI or other systems, right? So, the careers and the positions that folks are looking for are highly collaborative. So you need to build those skills early on. Our newest classroom space, so this is an interesting example of what challenges higher ed faces around innovation. When I looked at what our students needed to have more collaborative learning opportunities, one of the ideas that I wanted to bring about was a retail lab. So imagine that students are developing their own products and services as part of this program. They need a place to actually sell them and to engage with customers, right? So I pitched to the administration building what is now called our Shift Retail Lab. And at first, the administration said, well, show me research evidence of other universities that have already deployed this and how it's working for them. And I was like, well, if you want your director of innovation to bring you things that other people have already done, then we have different definitions of what your innovation director should do, right? I think my role as innovation is to actually do new things. And I said, no one's ever done this before. We did a quick search. There was no other university in the United States that had created a space like this. And then our institution was like, whoa, we can't do that. We need evidence that this is a good idea. However, I went to a community partner, local business, and said, this is the ability for our students to work on real world projects together and sell to the public. And he was in first conversation, one handshake, paid for the entire thing, $1.5 million gift, built the entire facility for us. 6 months after that facility opened, we won an award from Fast Company as a 2022 world-changing idea. We hosted more than 140 different organizations in that space, had 6,000 people come through the doors, and launched companies that went to Techstars, Y Combinator, and raised millions in venture capital in the first 12 months of opening. Now, administratively, there was a lot of pushback because no one had done this before, right? And yet the piece that I communicated to our business partners was, we have been teaching the sciences in a classroom environment coupled with a laboratory environment. That's how you teach science, right? No one would think you would take chemistry solely in a classroom without taking a chemistry lab. So why would we teach business and entrepreneurship without a laboratory component? And giving students the ability to practice these skills in a laboratory environment is what we need to do for the future of education. And so, watching the difference between a student team collaborating in the classroom and then standing up in front of their peers and giving a PowerPoint presentation about their product is very different than watching a student team collaborate on a product, then present in a retail environment with their product on the shelf, open to the public, where the city of Richmond comes in and prospective customers look at them and go, I don't get it. And they're like, what do you mean you don't get it? Right? That is where I think the real learning happens. And I think we need new spaces. Another example I give is, you look at, where do our students want to go to work? Look at how Facebook and Google and Twitter organize their workplaces, and then look at the majority of our classrooms. They look nothing alike. Why would we prepare people in rows and in lecture halls to go work in places that require highly dynamic, collaborative, colorful, active environments? There's a huge disconnect there. So we need to do more to recreate the level of intensity and collaboration and fluidity of these workplaces in our academic spaces and curriculum.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that you mentioned about various examples from your university and how you've been able to build a very successful collaborative environment that has bore fruits, not just for the teams, but I think for the organization as a whole. Even at Woxsen, I just wanted to share with you, Garret. So we are focusing big time on emerging technologies, on entrepreneurship, on financial services. And here at Woxsen as well, we've seen student groups. And as I said, we follow a very multidisciplinary approach. If a model of a robot is being designed by an arts and design student, the coding of the same could be done by a technology student. and the commercialization aspect of the same could be done by a management student. So I think we have seen that very actively being worked upon here at Woxsen, and then the same models are being then proposed to the companies outside, and then they are showing interest. We're doing consulting projects, students working along with faculty members, learning from them, contributing, of course, bringing fresh perspective, because of course it's important to hear from the students' point of view as well on how can certain techniques in the new robotics or new models can be brought in. I think it brings a whole lot of fresh perspective, and that happens only via collaboration. So I think I totally agree with what you've mentioned, Garret. Going forward, my next question is on about a very important area, which is taking feedback and reflecting on that, right? As a team, when we are working on any innovation project together, I think it's also important to take feedback and do some reflections, and then be prepared on how you're going to take the journey forward. So I think you cannot just be going on a very, I would say, a very boxed approach, which is where you don't want to hear what the other people say, but you just keep moving forward in the way that you think is right for you. So I think that is something which we need to be understanding on, how to be receptive, taking constructive criticisms and take feedback and move along the way. So what are your views on that? Because a lot of students are hearing this. So I think maybe if you could inspire some students hearing that.
Absolutely. So one of the changes that we made to our curriculum was to really use 360 feedback as a core part of our assessment and our courses. So by 360 feedback, I mean, everyone else in the class is evaluating you and your performance repeatedly throughout the semester.
Yes.
That makes a big difference, right? Instead of you are doing this by yourself, you're trying to get an A, you're going to do great work and forget everybody else in the classroom. When your team evaluates you, when your corporate mentor evaluates you, when the business mentors we bring in evaluate you, in addition to your faculty member, it paints a very different picture. You can be brilliant and a jerk. And that's not who we're looking for, right? Like we're looking for people. I would rather have someone that's just smart and not brilliant, but able to work collaboratively with other people, right? And so I think by using 360 feedback, we've been able to give students real-time feedback, not just at the end of the semester, but hey, 3 weeks in. So we do a lot of, formal agreements with student teams where they build contracts with each other, where they come up with how are they going to communicate with each other? What are the expectations of the members of their team? So they're upfront about, and we spend the time to really build those skills. That's why all of our students are trained as Scrum Masters, right? Like they understand project management skills so that they can then use those with each other to be successful. So I think that if as much as possible, if you aren't already, the use of 360 feedback has been a really valuable teaching tool. And then some students do need coaching in that, right? Like that's a new way of assessment for a lot of students that are just used to getting grades in school. This idea that the person sitting next to them in their team is a part of their grade, like that can be challenging, but that also resembles how the world works, right? Like you don't take tests or exams at the workplace. No one sits you down and says, this is your final exam. You have performance evaluations, and those are largely based on some of the same metrics that 360 evaluations are.
Absolutely. I mean, the 360 feedback that you're talking about on the evaluation and assessments, I think we also, we've been following that across semesters, feedback of the students for the faculty as well, around the semester, so that they can understand on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you rate a faculty? And that is again assessed based on understanding which are the areas that a faculty needs to improve on, whether using more case studies, using more of say role plays in the class, right? You never know. I mean, students expect different areas to be highlighted on in different classes, and nowadays it's more about how do you make your classes more interactive? How do you make your classes more engaging? And that's how I think we have been focusing on constant feedback for faculties, as well as for the staff, for the improvement of the university as well. We take staff feedback for the institution as well on what are the areas, whether it's in hospitality, whether it's in administration, whether it's in infrastructure, or any comments that they would want to have. I think it's all about taking the feedback, improvising on that, and then moving along in the best interest of your team and the organization. So I think that's very, very critical in the success journey for any organization. My second last question, as we're moving on to the closure of this talk, and we've got a wide perspective from you, my penultimate question would be, when we are talking about, prioritizing education, prioritizing domain knowledge. Now, I would just give you a perspective. In India, just to set the context, we are a society that is more, in general, driven towards getting jobs like real quick. People want to, complete their graduation and then look out for placements, good placements in good companies, right? So the very first day when a student joins a B school would like to see whether 2 years down the line, after completing their MBA, where the student would want to work, and they want to work in some of the dream companies of their own. So I think in this journey, sometimes learning gets neglected and you're just focused on the end result, which is placements, good jobs. So we're at Woxsen, we are trying to turn things, and we are focusing on imparting skills, making students more articulate, and breaking that myth of just focusing only on jobs. So though we do good jobs, we do good placements, but I think we are focusing on the other side of imparting skills. So in fact, there was a recent, today I was having a class with the MBA students as well, where I did mention that there was a recent case study by Harvard, which did mention that nowadays 80% out of the 100% that is required for you to be successful is not your domain knowledge, but your skills, and these are soft skills, and 20% of which is domain knowledge, of course, which you need by the end of the day. So what are your views on having or embracing these 21st century skills in order to be more job ready, or for that matter, if anybody wants to start his own business, at the end of the day, you need to sell not just your products, but you need to sell your idea to the customer, to the clients.
You need to be able to sell yourself, right? You have to be able to sell yourself to employers.
Yes, you need to be selling yourself to the employer. So what are your views on that?
So a couple of things. One, I think, we talked about personalization, and I think students can come in and say, I want to take the curriculum that's going to let me get this great placement, right? But it's our job as educators to also challenge students and to make them uncomfortable in ways that they might not have chosen for themselves. So for example, our flagship program is a master's in product innovation. We had the first master's of product innovation program in the United States. And in that program, students do two things. They do corporate innovation, but they also do original entrepreneurship. And what we found is that we get a lot of students that come into our program that say, I want to do corporate innovation for a Pfizer, for a global Fortune 500 company. That's my ultimate goal. You're going to give me a great placement. And we say, yes, we work with those companies. That is an outcome. What happens is when they go through the coursework where they have to bring their own product to market, this light bulb goes off. And we see this happen both ways. We also get students that say, I'm coming to your program because it acts like a de facto accelerator. I've got a business idea. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And what they learn is the people that think they want to be corporate innovators are like, there's so much bureaucracy in the corporate sector. Like there's so much management and you can't move quickly and it's not nimble. And then the people, they're like, I want to do my own thing. I'm going to be an entrepreneur instead. And the people that come in as entrepreneurs are like, oh, entrepreneurship is hard. These companies have so much money. They have so many resources. I want to go get a corporate job. So I think some of it, you're right, is exposure. Like students need to be not just taught, this is entrepreneurship, this is corporate innovation. They have to live it. So how do you create opportunities for students to really live and experience something, and that might change their trajectory? And so I think we need to create those opportunities to put those things to the test. And then the other piece to allow students to do that has been micro-credentials. So we have really been looking at how can we use digital badging and micro-credentials to capture student skills, as well as help them build that 80% you were talking about to say, you know, I may be an engineer, I may be an MBA student. However, I have this digital badge in Adobe digital literacy, and I know how to use Figma, and I know how to use XD, even though I'm a business student, right? And it doesn't mean that I was a design student and I know it 100%, but like I can whip something up in Figma for you if you needed me to. And I think being able to capture that, not necessarily on a transcript, but via digital badges that document what you've done, coupled with giving students those experiences, is key.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with what you mentioned, and doing this digital badges and working on, you know, these capstone projects, or whether it is micro credentials at Woxsen as well. We are focusing a lot on, you know, since we have a Coursera for Campus license at Woxsen, so we do encourage not just students but also faculty members to be, you know, learning, relearning, unlearning certain things, and making themselves ready and embracing themselves for the change. I think that's very important. And the idea of, you know, as you rightly mentioned, you need to be versatile. And whether you're an engineering student or a design student or an architecture student, I think you need to be ready to take on challenges, which sometimes makes you uncomfortable. But I think these uncomfortable situations makes you ready for something bigger and better in life. And I think, you know, the message has been very, very beautifully conveyed through your conversation, you know, Garret. I would request our students listening this conversation, so please take this back as a takeaway from this conversation. And with that, we come to the last question, and the last, you know, I would say the first segment of our conversation. The second segment is a surprise, but I think I'll come to that in a bit. The last question, Garret, is what would be your message about Woxsen University, whatever you have known about Woxsen through our conversation today and before our conversation, whatever I did tell you on how our university is doing, big time on internationalization, research, corporate alignment, entrepreneurship, financial services, of course, on sustainability. We are contributing on ethics, responsibility, and sustainability. So in that, keeping that in the context, what is your message about Woxsen University to the world from the platform of the FutureYou Talks? If you could tell us and the audience listening to this.
I mean, I would encourage you all to look to the future and not the past. So I think rather than look at other institutions that we have held up and say, these are what prestigious institutions look like, I don't think you'll find that as helpful as looking to the future around how might we create the university of the future. And I think you all are on that track. And I think the pressure becomes, as you as a young university continue to mature, there will be that push to be more traditional, to look more like those that came before you. And I think the hard work and the path that you should remain on is that of being a visionary and looking to the future, because what history does tell us, right, is those organizations that can remain innovative, that can remain future-oriented, are the ones that survive and sustain. And those organizations that look to the past and cling to the past tend to be the ones that ultimately fail. And so I think that, you know, you all have an incredibly inspiring story of being so young, moving so quickly to achieve these, recognitions and designations, which is fantastic. But don't let those weigh you down, and don't let those restrain your thinking going forward.
Well, thank you so much, Garret. Thanks for that insight. And I really appreciate your time and your insights in this conversation. But now comes the time for the next segment, and a very rapid fire segment, which is unplanned, which of course was not conveyed to you before this, right? So are you ready for that, Garret?
Let's do it. I love it. I wish the whole thing could have been a surprise. That'd have been great.
All right. So I don't have the questions ready with me, by the way. I'm just thinking through as we are moving with this conversation. The first question is India or the US? I know it's difficult, but I think, maybe if you could just give it an honest response basis, whatever we are seeing as part of the changes, geopolitically, economically, environmentally.
So I will cheat, and I will say both. So some of my most successful students have been students from India who have come to the United States, who have flourished here. So the January cover of Entrepreneur magazine in India featured Vivek, who's one of my former students, right? They called him the MedTech Maverick. So he did undergraduate in India, and then he came to graduate school in the United States. So, I think there is an opportunity, like you said at the start of the call, to be in a more global environment. It's not an either or. It's not your way of doing it or our way of doing it. There is great learning to be had on how quickly you've been able to start a new institution of higher education. Like, that is super inspirational and not something that's easily done in the United States. However, there's some things about the United States that we do exceptionally well that I think can inform how a new university like you all is emerging. And I think I would cheat and answer your question and say both through better collaboration.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that honest response. I think you chose the third option, which never existed, but I think it's okay. We accept your answer. The second question, Garret, is charismatic leadership or transformational leadership? And the second one, transformational leadership or transactional leadership?
Transformational to both.
All right, thank you. And the last question would be, or maybe let's do it the second last question, because I have one more. I would say one word for COVID-19. It's a rapid fire, Garret.
Reflection.
All right. Thank you. Really appreciate it, because of course, COVID was a period of reflection, by the way. And the last question would be, if you were to give 3 words as a message for the world from the platform of the FutureYou Talks, what would those 3 words be?
Lead with empathy.
Sorry?
Lead with empathy.
Lead with empathy. Thank you. Thank you. I think that really, it's a really beautiful response, because it resonates well with me, and I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people in the audience as well. Thank you. Thank you so much, Garret, for this lovely conversation, and really enjoyed every bit. And I really hope if we can have more of these conversations going forward. I look forward to extending and starting our association with you personally, in your personal capacity. I will talk more about that offline once we are through with this conversation. But thank you so much. Any last remarks, comments, before we.
I look forward to future partnership. I'm planning to spend a couple of weeks in India in August of this year. So would love to maybe come by campus and get a chance to meet with you all in person. That'd be fantastic. And, certainly if anyone has questions about research, academic collaborations, we'll do that offline, but, shameless plug to your students, if anyone is interested in our Masters of Product Innovation, your institution seems uniquely prepared to send students who are looking to the US for sort of a graduate degree program in product innovation that is one of the best and offers some great transferable skills, India or the US, as the case may be. So happy to answer any questions from students about that or anything else.
Sure, thank you. I think I'll be very happy to extend that conversation with you going forward. I'll be writing to you. I think there's a comment that has come in. I think there was one question from Lasya as well, but I think we'll take that over email going forward because we're just ending. But there's a comment which says, wonderful insights from the talk, truly a breath of fresh air on a new approach to higher education. Thank you, Garret and Chahat. So I think kudos to you, Garret, for providing the insights that made this a very engaging and a very thought-provoking conversation. We look forward, and again, I really look forward to seeing you and receiving you at Woxsen campus in August. Please do feel free to write to me about your plans. And we are in Hyderabad. Please do make a stop over for few days, and we'll be very happy to look for some partnership and discuss more collaboration opportunities with you. Thank you. Thank you, audience. Thank you for your patient listening. And we'll be back once again with the next episode of the FutureYou Talks the next month.